It all started on a Tuesday evening when Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett took to a live podcast hosted by a progressive outlet in Brooklyn. Meant to be a casual political Q&A session, the conversation quickly turned toward the Trump administration and more specifically, Karoline Leavitt, the sharp, bold, and unapologetically conservative White House press secretary serving under President Donald Trump. Crockett smirked as she leaned closer to the mic. "I mean, can we talk about Karoline Leavitt for a minute?" she asked, rolling her eyes. "She's like a dollar store version of Kayleigh McEnany, except with more hairspray and less facts." The liberal audience burst into laughter, clapping and hollering with approval. The host chuckled nervously, sensing the line had been crossed but unwilling to stop the momentum. "You don't think she's effective?" the host probed. "Effective? Please," Crockett scoffed. "She reads off that podium like it's an audition for reality TV. She couldn't tell the truth if it walked up to her and slapped her in the face." The clip spread like wildfire across social media. Within hours, it had racked up over 4 million views on TikTok and nearly 10 million impressions on X, formerly Twitter. Progressives praised Crockett's bravery while conservatives fumed. Hashtags like #RespectCaroline, #CrockettClownShow, and #GutfeldTonight began trending, and that's when Greg Gutfeld entered the chat. By the next night, Gutfeld, Fox News late-night juggernaut and cultural commentary show, was buzzing. Greg Gutfeld, known for his wit, sarcasm, and razor-sharp takedowns, had already teased the segment earlier that day with a cryptic post. "Tonight, we talk about what happens when a low-rated congresswoman tries to dunk on someone out of her league. Spoiler, she misses." The segment opened with Greg leaning over his desk, eyebrows raised, the iconic smirk already plastered across his face. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "let's talk about what happens when Twitter clout meets intellectual drought. I'm talking, of course, about Jasmine Crockett, congresswoman by day, stand-up wannabe by night." Laughter erupted from the live audience. He continued, apparently mocking a hardworking, sharp, and accomplished woman like Karoline Leavitt is now considered bravery on the left. "I thought bravery was storming the beaches of Normandy, not misfiring zingers on a podcast nobody listens to." The screen flashed a clip of Crockett making her comments, followed by a dramatic pause. Gutfeld leaned back, fingers steepled. "Now I could go low. I could point out that Jasmine Crockett's biggest legislative achievement is showing up for interviews dressed like she's headed to the BET Awards. But I won't." The audience roared. Even co-host Kat Timpf visibly covered her mouth, laughing. "What I will do," Gutfeld said, "is remind Congresswoman Crockett that Karoline Leavitt isn't some plastic political pawn. She's a Harvard-educated firebrand who takes on a hostile press corps daily without flinching. She's articulate. She's focused. She's everything that scares the modern left." He gestured to a screen showing Karoline Leavitt's most recent press briefing, in which she calmly dismantled a CNN reporter's loaded question about immigration policy. The clip showed Karoline's precise delivery, confident tone, and her signature ending line, "This administration doesn't cater to hysteria, we deliver results." Greg turned back to the camera. "Jasmine Crockett calls that reality TV? Honey, if that's reality TV, then the Kardashians should be taking notes." The crowd howled. Gutfeld's segment became the most watched late-night clip that week, garnering even more views than The Tonight Show and The Daily Show combined. Conservative influencers reposted it in droves, and Karoline Leavitt herself even quote-posted it, adding only 2 words, "class dismissed." The firestorm was now a wildfire, and Gutfeld wasn't done yet. The next morning, the media landscape had split into 2 distinct camps. Mainstream liberal pundits tried to downplay Greg Gutfeld's segment, calling it juvenile late-night fodder, while others accused him of punching down at a sitting congresswoman. But conservative media, and more importantly, the American people tuning in, had a different take. They saw it as long overdue pushback against elitist condescension toward young, conservative women like Karoline Leavitt. Karoline appeared on Fox and Friends that morning, her tone composed but firm. "I'm not surprised someone like Congresswoman Crockett chose insults over ideas," she said, sitting upright in a crisp blue blazer. "It's become the left's strategy. If they can't win the argument, they attack the messenger. But I'm not going anywhere." The clip went viral. Meanwhile, Gutfeld doubled down. That night, he followed up with a second segment titled, "When Clowns Throw Shade, The Crockett Chronicles." He opened the show with mock drama. The lights dimmed. A spotlight centered on his desk. Dramatic music played as he read a mock monologue like he was hosting Dateline NBC. "Tonight," he said gravely, "we investigate the case of a bold congresswoman who set out to slander a rising star, only to trip over her own ego and fall face first into irrelevance. His audience erupted again. Crockett said Karoline reads like she's in reality TV? Okay, but has anyone read Jasmine Crockett's voting record? It's emptier than a vegan's fridge on barbecue night. Even Kat Timpf couldn't contain herself this time, giggling as she added, I've seen more depth in a TikTok dance challenge. Gutfeld turned serious, relatively speaking, for a moment. You know what bothers me most? He said. It's not the insult. It's the arrogance. These elitist lawmakers think they're above reproach. But when Karoline stands behind that podium, she's not just speaking for the administration, she's speaking for the millions of Americans who are sick of being sneered at. He pointed directly at the camera. We've had enough of people like Jasmine Crockett talking down to people like Karoline Leavitt. Just because you wear a pin that says Congress doesn't mean your ideas or your insults carry weight. Later that night, Jasmine Crockett responded on X, clearly rattled, if Greg Gutfeld and Karoline Leavitt want to throw shade, I suggest they bring umbrellas because the storm is just getting started. But even liberals in the comments began questioning the wisdom of Crockett's continued escalation. One user, a self-identified independent, replied, maybe take the L, Jasmine. You went after someone who's done nothing but her job and now you're the punchline. That response got more likes than Crockett's original tweet. Meanwhile, Karoline continued her duties undeterred. At the next White House press briefing, she was peppered with questions about immigration, border enforcement, and Trump's economic plans for Middle America. Not once did she flinch. When a reporter from MSNBC smirked and asked if she'd like to respond to Congresswoman Crockett's fashion critique, Karoline smiled, then leaned into the mic. I think the American people are less concerned about my hairspray and more concerned about their grocery bill. The room fell silent for a moment before breaking into quiet chuckles even among some members of the typically combative press corps. The clip circulated like wildfire. Conservative media outlets hailed it as a mic drop moment. Even some centrists and moderate Democrats began admitting that was actually pretty good. Behind the scenes, Greg Gutfeld reportedly sent Karoline a bouquet of red, white, and blue roses with a handwritten note, keep doing what you're doing. You're making DC afraid of smart women again. GG. The partnership between Gutfeld and Karoline wasn't just symbolic, it was becoming emblematic of a growing movement, one where everyday Americans were tired of smug DC elitism and ready to support unapologetic truth-tellers. No matter how young or how female they might be, but the feud was far from over. Jasmine Crockett was plotting her redemption and a primetime showdown was already in the works. By the weekend, what began as a spicy late-night segment had ballooned into a full-blown cultural flashpoint. Conservative pundits were calling it a teachable moment. Progressive commentators insisted it was just political theater. But average Americans? They were picking sides and watching closely. Fox News wasn't letting the moment pass. Greg Gutfeld announced that the following Monday night would feature a special episode titled, Truth, Lipstick, and Liberty, Why Karoline Leavitt Wins. In contrast, MSNBC announced Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett would sit down with Rachel Maddow that same night in what was being promoted as an exclusive primetime response. The media hyped it as an ideological duel, sharp-witted, firebrand conservative commentator versus a progressive congresswoman with a flair for flashy words and controversial one-liners. Both knew millions would be watching 8:00 p.m. EST Monday night. The Fox News studio was alive with anticipation. Greg Gutfeld stepped onto the stage, greeted by thunderous applause. He wore a dark navy suit with a subtle red pocket square, a nod to Trump's America First colors, and opened with what would become the defining line of the night. Tonight, we don't just clap back. We clap up because when someone tries to drag you down, you stand taller. The crowd stood, clapping and whistling. Gutfeld nodded, then went in. He replayed clips of Karoline Leavitt shutting down reporters, breaking down Trump's second-term economic reforms, and her passionate response to the fentanyl crisis delivered just days earlier from the White House podium. Her words were clear: this administration is fighting for the soul of the nation. For safety, for jobs, for truth. Then came Greg's breakdown. You know what scares Jasmine Crockett and her friends? It's not Karoline's age. It's not her hair. It's not even her loyalty to Trump. It's that Karoline Leavitt represents a future where women on the right aren't afraid to fight back. They're polished, prepared, and impossible to cancel. Cut to MSNBC. Maddow's studio was bathed in cool tones. Jasmine Crockett appeared donning a crimson pantsuit and her trademark hoop earrings. She opened with a scoff. Look, I don't hate Karoline. But I'm not going to pretend she's some kind of superhero just because she reads a script well. Rachel Maddow nodded cautiously. Do you regret the comment you made about her being a dollar store Kaylee? Jasmine smiled smugly. No. In fact, I stand by it. If the truth hurts, wear padding. The response didn't land. Even on her home turf, viewers began noticing something off. Crockett's jabs felt recycled, her tone defensive. Online polls conducted by neutral outlets like The Hill and Real Clear Politics revealed a stunning swing. Over 62% of viewers said they found Karoline more respectful, composed, and relatable, while only 27% sided with Crockett. Back at Gutfeld, Greg welcomed Karoline herself onto the show via satellite. She was poised, smiling with her usual confidence. Greg didn't waste time. Karoline, you've become the face of strength under fire. Any message for Congresswoman Crockett? Karoline chuckled. I'd say this, when you mock someone doing their job, you reveal more about yourself than them. And if your argument starts with an insult, it probably ends with irrelevance. The crowd erupted. I don't care what names people call me, she continued. I care about what kind of country my future children will live in. That's why I show up every day, ready? Greg nodded solemnly. That's why America's with you. Within hours, #Team Karoline trended nationally. Even moderate independents, particularly suburban women and young voters, began resharing Karoline's quotes with admiration. She wasn't just a press secretary anymore, she was a symbol of the fight for truth, poise, and resilience in a hostile political world. That night, Fox News viewership soared past 6.8 million for Gutfeld's show, a personal record. Meanwhile, MSNBC's Maddow episode saw only a modest bump and was widely critiqued by viewers who expected more substance. But this was just the middle act, because the real twist came when Karoline Leavitt received a surprise invitation to testify before Congress about media bias, female leadership, and public perception in American politics. And guess who was on the committee overseeing the hearing? Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. The rotunda of the Rayburn House office building buzzed like a hornet's nest. Reporters packed into the marble-lined hallways, photographers poised for the moment Karoline Leavitt entered. It wasn't every day the White House press secretary was called to testify before Congress, not about policy or scandal, but about her image, her conduct, and her cultural influence. The hearing, officially titled Women in Leadership: Discourse, Media and Public Perception, was anything but routine. Beneath the polished language was an open political minefield. Conservatives knew it was a thinly veiled attempt to humiliate Karoline. Liberals hoped for a soundbite that could reverse the media momentum. But neither side expected what happened next. At exactly 10 a.m., Karoline Leavitt entered the chamber in a tailored white suit, her blonde hair immaculately swept back. She walked with quiet confidence, unbothered by the flashes and whispered chatter. Her composure sent a subtle message: I'm not here to play defense. I'm here to speak truth. She took her seat at the witness table, flanked by two other panelists, an Ivy League professor and a progressive journalist. The committee chair gavelled the room to order, and at the far left side of the committee panel, arms folded, lips pursed, sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. When it came time for opening remarks, Karoline delivered hers without notes. I thank the committee for this opportunity. I stand here not as a partisan warrior, but as a public servant. I was appointed to serve the American people, regardless of politics, gender, or background. Unfortunately, in recent weeks, I've become the target of not just criticism, but ridicule from elected officials who ought to know better. She paused, locking eyes with Crockett. It's not my hairstyle that should concern Congress. It's our economy. It's the border. It's the fentanyl killing our kids and the inflation emptying our wallets. If you want to debate ideas, I'm ready. But if we've stooped to debating appearances, maybe it's time to rethink what public service means. Even the liberal journalist next to her blinked in astonishment. The room fell silent except for the frantic scribbling of reporters. Karoline had just turned a political ambush into a national moment of clarity. Then came the questions and the fireworks. Congresswoman Crockett leaned forward, microphone turned up. Ms. Leavitt, some believe your responses in recent press briefings were calculated performance. Would you say you're more concerned with perception than truth? Karoline smiled softly. Respectfully, Congresswoman, if I wanted to perform, I'd be in Hollywood. The truth is what I live by. If I cared about perception, I'd pretend insults don't bother me. But I'm here today because they do, because they distract from what matters. Crockett leaned back, momentarily stunned. She hadn't expected Karoline to disarm with grace. She glanced around. Many of her colleagues didn't look impressed. Some even whispered to each other, clearly sensing the optics were backfiring. Greg Gutfeld, watching from a private media room in New York, texted his producer, "This is political jiu-jitsu in real time. She's crushing it." Outside the hearing room, Americans tuned in via livestream, enthralled. Social media exploded with clips of Karoline dismantling attacks with class. A TikTok edit of her public servant remark hit 1 million views in under an hour. Twitter, X, users revived the hashtag Karoline class. The hearing dragged on, but the verdict in the court of public opinion was already set. Jasmine Crockett looked petty. Karoline Leavitt looked presidential. After the hearing adjourned, reporters clamored around her. One asked, "Do you feel vindicated after everything?" Karoline answered without skipping a beat, "I'm not here for vindication. I'm here because the American people deserve adults in the room, and I intend to be one." Meanwhile, as Crockett left the chamber, she ignored the questions and slipped away without comment, her glare cold, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor, but the damage was done. Politico released a snap analysis titled, "Karoline Leavitt Emerges as the Voice of a New Conservative Generation." And back in the West Wing, President Donald Trump watched the hearing with a rare look of solemn pride. He turned to J.D. Vance and said, "She's a fighter. And we need fighters who can win with grace." That evening, the Gutfeld studio in New York felt more electric than ever. The earlier congressional hearing had already broken the internet. Karoline Leavitt's composed dismantling of Jasmine Crockett's rhetoric was trending on every platform, and Greg Gutfeld was about to drive the nail in with the sharpest hammer in late-night TV. The audience was alive, clapping even before Greg walked on stage. As he emerged under the bright lights, he was grinning ear to ear. "Good evening, America. I hope you're sitting down because the meltdown of the year just aired live on C-SPAN. Yes, that dusty channel you only watch by accident." Laughter erupted. He didn't even have to say names yet. The audience already knew. In today's episode of How to Lose the Plot in Congress, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett forgot that politics is about ideas, not Instagram shade. You'd think she was prepping for the Met Gala, not a government hearing. Greg clicked a remote, and a massive screen behind him played a short clip of Crockett's earlier remarks mocking Karoline's hair and voice tone. He paused at mid-sentence, then turned to the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, when the best rebuttal you have is, 'She's too blonde and too confident,' you've already lost." That's like challenging Elon Musk to a rocket-building contest and showing up with a bottle rocket from Walmart. More laughter. The screen then cut to Karoline Leavitt's composed response. "It's not my hairstyle that should concern Congress." Greg put a hand to his heart. Did anyone else feel that? Was that pride in our government? What is this strange emotion? "Quick, someone slap me to make sure it's real." He turned serious for a moment, his tone still comedic but now edged with purpose. Karoline Leavitt did something most politicians today can't. She faced down insults without resorting to pettiness. She didn't scream. She didn't play victim. She calmly, surgically, and professionally dismantled the nonsense. She showed America that you can stand your ground and still look like a leader. And in doing so, she didn't just own the room, she owned the narrative. His co-host, Kat Timpf, chimed in with mock concern. "Greg, I'm just shocked Jasmine Crockett didn't accuse Karoline of glamour privilege. You know, being too put together while answering questions accurately." The audience howled, then Tyrus added, "Deadpan, Karoline came with facts. Crockett came with sass." And Twitter turned her sass into a meme disaster. Greg couldn't resist piling on. At this point, Crockett might want to switch careers. "I hear Bravo's looking for new drama queens for Real Housewives of DC, and judging by today, she's already auditioning." Behind him, an edited image of Crockett holding a wine glass with the caption, "I came to Congress to be petty, not productive." The crowd lost it. But the show wasn't just about laughs. Greg closed the segment with something that felt like a mission statement. This isn't just about a hair joke or a viral soundbite. It's about who we are as a country. We're in the middle of real struggles, border chaos, inflation, rising crime, and the people elected to solve these issues are busy playing mean girls on Capitol Hill? No thanks. I'll take someone like Karoline Leavitt, smart, strong, and unapologetically focused. As the show wrapped up, Greg turned once more to the camera, this time with a solemn tone. "Karoline, if you're watching, you didn't just survive the fire, you turned it into light. That's leadership." And America noticed. Epilogue: the public responds. By the end of the week, donations to conservative candidates surged. Karoline Leavitt's approval ratings in key states spiked by double digits. Even some moderate Democrats began publicly criticizing Crockett's behavior, calling it unproductive, embarrassing, and beneath the dignity of the office. Hashtag Karoline class trended for 5 consecutive days, and as for Greg Gutfeld, that episode of Gutfeld became the most watched late-night segment of the quarter. On social media, Americans posted reactions ranging from applause to admiration. Karoline stood her ground like a lioness in a pack of hyenas. Jasmine got ratioed by her own pettiness. Greg Gutfeld said what the rest of us were thinking. The message was clear: Americans were tired of divisive theatrics. They wanted leaders, not loudmouths, and on that unforgettable night, when Greg Gutfeld used his platform not just to mock, but to magnify the truth, he didn't just destroy Jasmine Crockett. He helped rebuild the meaning of public discourse.